Destiny's Cosmology explained for the first time ever on YouTube by a complete freaking nobody. Okay, did I get your attention? Good, what's up? Hello there. You may be a new viewer of my channel, or you may be a returning one. Regardless, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Nothing Important here, and I have been, for the last 2 years, the de facto you go to me if you want to know Destiny stuff kind of guy. People on Reddit and other platforms have recommended my content to others, due to the fact that, well, they believe I'm right about Destiny research. And as the only person who's been scaling Destiny to this extent, for this amount of time, I'd say, I thought, in my expertise, I believe would be a good time to do a cosmology video. Last year, I meant to do a cosmology video after my analysis on the Witness. However, they kept teasing about the expansion to the cosmology, which happened in every episode. So now, before Edge of Fate releases, I want to give you a meta-analysis of the entire cosmos going into the Edge of Fate expansion so you know what you're playing with.
And now, we would have you join us, Commander.
A few notes before we begin. First off, we have no established map of the cosmology. The only thing close to that we have is a director screen in the game, which changes from year to year, so even then it's not going to remain the same. That being said, this inherently makes this video as a de facto part 1. The moment we get something like a cosmological model release, an explanation of the entire mythos and how it works, or anything of the equivalent, a follow-up video will be made to this one. Second, this is an objective-based analysis. Anything stated in the form of speculation will be stated as speculation. Everything else I provide to you in the video will be provided to you in the context of the game already gave it to us to begin with. I will be using a combination of factors, what's shown on the screen, the lore, and other extra information we have from the canon. If you have an issue with me doing an analysis of the cosmos and not just using what's on the screen, please go somewhere else. In every cosmology video you see on YouTube, you see a combination of feats, statements, story context, and other important factors being included in the overall analysis of that cosmos, and this video will be no different from those. If you still wish to remain here in spite of that, thank you for your time, and please give me the chance to convince you of what I know. Last note before I continue, Destiny is a live service based game. Destiny as a story will always change, evolve, and morph into something different in spite of the criticisms we give it now. The state of the story, compared to its current form, will be unrecognizable in a year or two from now. While we're on that same note, Destiny is releasing 2 expansions a year, meaning whatever video I make now may seem lacking in the future, but that's the reason why I do an annual analysis of each piece of content we have at the game in the moment.
Where to even start?
I died.
You probably remember that. Not great. Partly my fault. Lesson learned. Let's not dwell.
Starting with the physical universe, what is it? The easiest answer is, it is the place where all the story stuff that's important occurs 9 out of 10 times. Your PvP games, your gambits, your nightfall strikes, dungeons, raids, exotic missions, so on and so forth. While content of that sort does exist outside of the physical universe, a lot of that content you'll see mostly inside the physical universe. To those of you from the anime, manga, book, or other such communities, if you're newer to Destiny, the complex sensor is not quite so easy to explain. What I will do is put it to you like this without getting into any jargon. The physical universe is not the only realm in the cosmology with a specific job. In the entire cosmos, all the realms within it have their own job. The Pale Heart, for example, is more or less the Traveler's brain. We go in there and we're able to commune with the Traveler much more easily rather than outside of it. That's what the Pale Heart is. It's basically this throne world, big, giant brain thing. Another example, which is something a lot of people outside of the franchise know Destiny for, is the Ascendant Plane. The Ascendant Plane not only has the power of darkness inside of it, but also is governed by the power of darkness itself. Darkness is not physical, and it acts in a way that isn't physical, that is only tangible by beings who can enter that place or who live in that place. That is the job of the Ascendant Plane, to act as the other half of the physical. Another example would be the ley lines, which is able to defy the rules we have for dimensional travel, which is you cannot go from one part of the cosmos to the other conventionally. The ley lines are what we have to circumvent that. They can go to about anywhere in the cosmology if arranged in a certain way. Think of the ley lines as a set of cosmology-wide plant roots that took a lot of ketamine. Then, moving on to the subject of this segment, the physical universe. The job of the physical universe is to hold life within it. Life that can only be created or born physically. Something that cannot be manifested out of simply nothing. A place where you can only follow the rules of life, the rules of physics, the rules of reality, of all of space and time. Rules that we would expect within the universe you are watching this video in. The physical universe holds host to this kind of life. You'll typically see guardians, which can either be Awoken, Exos, humans, and in some reports, Ahamkara, and even other races than just Ahamkara. We have a lot of unconfirmed reports at this time, but know that the subject of Guardian Kind is very broad and who's a part of it. But do note that Guardian Kind all share the same vision, even if they see that vision differently, which is the protection of the last city from all of those who would dare oppose it. Alright, so I established the dynamic of the physical universe. What about the stuff that's inside of it? Good question. So, to my veteran fans, do we all remember Season of Dawn? While I won't add multiple seasons worth of content in this video to make it over 5 hours, here's what I will bring up. The sundial on Mercury shows that an individual planet has an infinite amount of possible futures. That is beyond countably conceivable. That is an individual planet alone, which is an infinite multiverse of its own localized making. That's just a planet. You have 9 planets in the solar system, stars, black holes, and other cosmologically dubious events. If a freaking planet alone is more than a universe, what do you think of other celestial bodies in the physical universe would even act like? One such bizarre and extreme example would be the moon Nessus. Nessus is a moon which has 10 dimensions. Also, time itself on Nessus is not linear. The past, present, and future can all meet itself in one localized point in time. If the universe was supposedly simple, of only having 4 dimensions in it, why is it that multiple parts of the cosmology defy 4th and even 5th dimensional rules of time and space? Just something I would want you to consider. That's mostly it for the physical universe. It's the domain of the light. It's way bigger than a mere universe when it holds a multiverse of all things inside of it, and it is one of the most significant parts of the cosmology. To say it is very powerful would be understating it, but at the same time, there's no need to overcomplicate it, other than, hey, it holds the Traveler and the Veil inside of it, so that's all I'd really have to say about the physical universe.
I formed my throne with the stroke of a sword, as the Hive Gods did long ago. Their tribute and blood coalesced into worlds. You have seen Oryx's throne, his dreadnought, his court, what he called the High Wall. Here, the memory of the Taken King recognizes his equal, his killer, his heir.
Next, what is the Ascendant Plane? The easy answer is this. The Ascendant Plane is the most iconic part of Destiny's cosmology people in and outside of the franchise know it for. The Ascendant Plane itself is home to the Hive and the Taken, and some Dread. The Ascendant Plane is a place that a lot of people know, which is ruled by the gods, which is the Worm Gods and the other Hive Gods. There are under a count of 10 Hive Gods at this time, who rule the entire plane. The Hive themselves as a race is very political. Their politics mostly devolve into combat, so translating a lot of the combat that the Hive do, it's very apparent that a lot of their morals, ethics, and traditions are all very political based. Hive politics, unlike normal politics in real life, is quite simple. They do things by strength in combat, and the strongest Hive Gods, or the Worm Gods and the other Hive Gods, are all the strongest and they do their own thing. They don't encroach on each other. In fact, they train each other and they teach the other how to get around certain ways they were defeated before. For reference, look at the various behaviors of the Hive Gods in the Books of Sorrow, a set of books which have dated back to 2015, and the release of the Taken King era. It is also worth noting that the Hive view love and hate as one and the same. So Xivu Arath, being the goddess of war, in another perspective would be the goddess of love. Oryx, the navigator, would be the innovator or the expander. Savathun, as the one who's the smartest of the three in terms of pure intelligence, trying to develop the technique and skills of the wizards and other Hive, are trying to make the Hive stronger fundamentally. Each of the Hive have their own responsibility in what they contribute to the greater collective of the Hive. It's all very interesting stuff in their dynamics, but to boil it down to something simple, it's this. The Hive Gods are not acting in opposition to each other, even if they have differing beliefs. Above all else, the Hive Gods value each other above, well, everything else. No matter how much the Hive Gods stray from each other or have quarrels and rivalries, they value each other over everything else in all of creation. The last note I would like to make regarding the Hive is this heavily translates into their violent behaviors. To the rest of the universe, the Hive are defying the social contract in every conceivable and non-conceivable way imaginable. To the Hive, it's completely different. The Hive, compared to every other race in Destiny, is the most passionate about their beliefs. While we see very horrible things happening, to the Hive, what they see is they share their idea of strength with their rivals. They're looking for competitors. They want to challenge themselves against something and find a new rival. They wish to make themselves stronger, and they wish to be eternally forever growing, and they don't want to stop at all. They want to be relentless. The dreams of many a man are to live a life of family, unity, peace, serenity, success, glory, and responsibility. To live out the dream we set for ourselves to obtain all those things, that is the biggest hit of dopamine a man or woman could ever receive in their lives. That hit of dopamine you would get from obtaining those things is the same hit of dopamine that the Hive get from conquering the entire universe, being the strongest, defeating their rivals, and having nothing left to challenge them. What I just described to you in the ways that many a man dream are what many a Hive dream to do to the universe and all within it. To put it simply, if you don't fear the Vex, then the ones you should fear would be the Hive, because the Hive will never stop until they get what they want, which is the death of everything. If you were to ask me the hard question, which is, how would you describe the Ascendant Plane in the most complex and elaborate manner? Here's what I would give to you. The Ascendant Plane is everything the physical universe is not. Within our space, the physical universe, we recognize things such as space, time, dimensionality, shape, math, the laws of matter, and other such laws that govern reality. Those things are completely absent from the Ascendant Plane. What about what's inside the plane, however? Good question. While there's a lot to be discussed on the topic of the plane, here's the overall list. You have the ley lines, the Sea of Screams. You have the Throne Worlds, which the Throne Worlds themselves are an interesting conversation to have. There's a beyond infinite amount of Ascendant Hive. The Hive themselves, once they gain enough tribute, they give enough of it to their gods, and they keep enough for themselves. Eventually, they earn the right to traverse the Ascendant Plane as a being who's ascendant within it. They gain a throne world. They gain something that's finally their own. When you go up the list of ascendant beings, it's unclear if there's Ascendant Ogres, Ascendant Knights, Ascendant Acolytes, Ascendant Thrall, Ascendant Wizards. We're not sure on the specifics. What we do know is, if you're Ascendant, you're likely an Acolyte, or you're a Knight, or you're a Wizard, or you're an Ogre. Shriekers themselves are odd enemies. Gameplay-wise, they're coded as weapons, but lore-wise, they're vessels to their gods. They act as a second pair of eyes. The only way I could see a Shrieker having a throne world was if the Hive God they came from made a throne world for them, then tossed them in it, so that the throne world acted as an extension of the god's throne world. We haven't seen behavior like that in the lore, and more likely than not, it is a wasted effort on all fronts. If it was something worth considering, the Hive would have done it by now. But instead, we mostly see Shriekers being posted as sentry turrets and to act as a second or third or 1000th set of eyes. Shriekers are interesting enemies, but they're the most dubious of likely every enemy type in the game, if we're being honest. Moving up the chain is the courts. Every single Hive God has a court of their own. Crota, for example, was on the court of Oryx. Now, he's left and made his own bloodline, and he has his own throne world. Crota would still be considered a part of Oryx's court, because he's the Prince of Hive. However, Crota is one of the strongest members of the courts. The daughters would be relative to Crota, but individually they would be below him, plus physically they're not quite as on par with Crota. Crota is not the smartest tool in the shed. He's like his father, but he's weaker, and far less competent on the mental front. While Crota is not by any means autistic, he's not bright either. He just goes head first into stuff and is very bloodthirsty. The daughters, on the other hand, are more cold and calculated. They do a bunch of other stuff to make up for the fact that physically, they don't hit worth jack. The daughters know this. This is why they created True Deaths. And Throne Worlds being thrown in with the whole concept of True Death, and you can see why the daughters slightly impressed Oryx with their ingenuity, innovation, and overall cunning. To say nothing else about the other courts of the gods would be criminal. Savathun's hive focus on refining the spellcraft of the witches, and overall hive faction in general, although nowadays they more favor the light stuff rather than the stuff of darkness, because they use Mbaru rather than the traditional sword logic of other hive factions. Xivu Arath's hive thrive on war. Without Oryx around to keep Xivu Arath and her hive in check, Xivu Arath's hive are little better than just rabid dogs who want nothing more than to destroy everything in front of them. There is a method to their madness, and they're certainly not lacking. Xivu Arath has been warring, and they've acted as a general for well over billions of years at this point. However, that being said, Xivu Arath is fairly straightforward with her faction of hive compared to the rest. Eris Morn, now that she's in the discussion as a hive god with a throne world, her court is different. Her throne is called the High Heresy. The High Heresy acts in opposition against her fellow, in quotations, hive. The Last City and the Guardians are the ones that roam her court. Humanity and the physical universe are her court. Her ambitions and what she strives to combat are her targets. Her court lives and thrives under the concept of warring against her enemies. Eris Morn embodies the concept of vengeance itself, and it shows. Of all the hive gods, Eris Morn is the most defensive of the hive gods. There is no hive god that can launch an invasion against her without her becoming a one-shot difference above them and completely cleaving them from this world. The only way to draw Eris Morn would be through a cold, calculated war. In an individual fight against Eris Morn, little hope of victory would be sought. Instead, all you can do is hopefully avoid her. When you look at the hive, we're aware of 4 different courts. We don't know if the worm gods have a court. It may be entirely possible that the worm gods are the strongest of all hive, and the Ascendant Plane, or at least the hive gods within it, are their court. We're not too sure about the worm gods yet. They're kind of in the same position as the Ahamkara and the Nine, where we know enough about them, but not a whole lot in comparison to everyone else. What I will say about the Ascendant Plane, however, is, along with what I just told you, I want you to keep something else in mind. You don't have to be that strong, and you can make the Ascendant Plane stronger. One of Oryx's daughters manifested 11 axioms, or 11 ideas, to describe the full scope of the plane, and then every throne world after that adopted a similar version of the 11 axioms, or 11 ideas concept that daughter of Oryx created. So single-handedly, the daughters of Oryx, along with their intelligence, innovation, and very creative cruelty, expanded the scope of the plane, even though they are nowhere near the witness in fighting ability. This is the nature of the Ascendant Plane. To be something that isn't stable, that isn't fixed, something that is driven by will, consciousness, power, mental ability, competence, every other stat imaginable that you can examine, and not necessarily the physical sense. That is what drives the structure of the plane. Let's conclude the Hive since I was talking for a while. The Hive live in the Ascendant Plane. The ley line is the general pathway into the plane. The Sea of Screams is the base level of the plane. A throne world belongs to an ascendant being. A throne world has 11 ideas or 11 concepts, whatever you think of those are, inside said throne world. There is a beyond infinite amount of these Ascendant Hive, and the throne worlds stack on top of each other, higher and higher, as more influential and more powerful as you get. Eventually, you arrive at the courts. The courts themselves being a very broad tier, because that consists of the politicking of 4 different hive gods, and the courts of the hive execute the will of the hive god in question. With 4 different courts all competing with each other, it is a very broad tier to discuss. The courts themselves I could make a 20 to even 50-minute video about alone. And then you have the hive gods. There are 9 of them at present. The 5 worm gods, the 4 hive gods. The placement of the worm gods in particular is not completely clear, but we do have the placement of the hive gods in particular. I'm going to leave that part in. We have the placement of the hive gods in particular, with Oryx at the top. The only competition with Oryx is who amongst the worm gods can compete with Oryx and why. And that, dear viewer, would be my answer to what is the Ascendant Plane in the most elaborate, complex way imaginable.
An emotional assessment. Life is prototypes and iterations. Each past you relative to you now. Third-dimensional beings struggle with this concept.
No more words. Surrender!
Why? How will you compel me if I refuse? Put it down, Icor. Honestly. The rest of you, lay down your arms. Thank you. Now, come, drink your fill. Let me change your mind.
You can choose to end this differently. Let this obsession go.
Choice is the ego raging against the inevitable.
You may not steal choice. But I make my own fate.
I command you.
Not this time.
I can only make you look. Perhaps, in time, you will see.
The Vex. One of the most misunderstood parts of Destiny. It's not that we lack material. It's not that we lack places that we've been to. It's not even that we lack on-screen stuff. It's that the Vex have genuinely been the most misunderstood race in the time that they've been in Destiny. And you know what? That does not surprise me one bit. So, we're here to change that. First, what are the Vex? They're not robots. They are living abominations made into reality. They act cyborgish. They act like they're robots, but they're life forms. Sentient, living life forms. Unlike other life forms, the Vex do not procreate. The Vex were made. They were optimized. They were created for the specific focus of being the most dominant life form in all of creation. And for a time, they were. Their creator, who I'll talk about later in the video, won every iteration of the Flower game. To keep it simple, the Flower game is the dawn of the universe and the end of the universe. The Vex won every iteration of the Flower game. It was only until the more recent times of the Flower game have the Vex truly been defeated and taken off the title as the strongest with something else to substitute them in their place. The Vex are terrifying. When the Vex saw what happened, they ran away from their creator. It's unknown how many of the unknown Vex are still around in creation, but what we do know is the Vex more than likely are the oldest of all races. If there's anything that knows the life, death, rebirth, and resetting of the universe, it would be the Vex. They would have all the knowledge regarding creation. Once the Vex entered the cosmology, the dynamic completely changed for them forever. Half the Vex, or more, remain in the Vex worlds. The other half of the Vex were sent to reality for a specific purpose, a specific goal. Those are the Vex we commonly see. We're not in the Vex worlds all that often, so there's a lot more that we could discover about them. However, that is not to be the case at this moment in time. The Vex did not have it easy, though. One misconception people have is the Vex are all fully unified. That's not the truth. They all share the same purpose, the same goal, which is to be the only ones left, so that nothing else can threaten them, but they all disagree on how to do it. There's different sects of Vex within the solar system, beyond the solar system, beyond the physical universe, and well, beyond the conventional cosmology. And we even have Vex who disagree with each other in the Vex worlds. The sole divisive Vex, as an example, are the extreme outliers. They gave themselves to darkness because they rationally justified to themselves that the only way to outlast everything was to give yourself to the witness. To some extent, they're correct. However, they became very unusual towards other Vex. They became fanatical. They became violent. They became very confrontational. They acted like freaking Asian hornets. It's ridiculous. The sole divisive Vex, while in some form can rationally justify their decisions, to everyone else, they're freaking crazy. They're nuts. They're insane. They're the most religious faction of all in the Destiny cosmos by far. No other race is that zealously religious. And that's just one sect of Vex. We have many others who focus on different parts of creation, and they're interesting as well. Panoptes, his set of Vex, made a bunch of universes to see which would give them the best outcome possible. Atheon, from the Vault of Glass. The Vault of Glass is basically his throne world, and he was to become the nexus point, or the center of all time, even outside of his own, well, throne world, so to speak, the Vault of Glass. Before I continue, there's going to be questions on what the Vault of Glass and what the Infinite Forest are. The Vault of Glass and the Infinite Forest are the seeds that the Vex implant into planets, and inside they become realities. So the planet itself is being parasitically attached to by the Vex. See, the planets themselves are fine, but it's when the Vex come by with all their stuff to infect the planet and basically turn it into a Vex machine is when things are not so cash money. With the Vex, they want to outlast everything. They understand where they're beat, but if they had things their way, there would be no light. There would be no dark. There would just be the Vex. And as you can imagine, they lack a moral compass. So the way they would achieve their goals are quite violent and creatively brutal. What the Vex do is to local cosmos, planet, person, technology, it doesn't matter. They will infect it on the most fundamental level possible, turn it into a Vex, and assimilate that into the collective. Yes, you heard that right. The Vex will slowly and quite brutally turn you into one of themselves. It's very gradual. Your DNA changes, you grow Vex parts, you slowly hear the thoughts of other Vex, and slowly over time, you become part of the collective. But it's not without pain. In fact, it's the most agonizing pain imaginable. You're being slowly turned into a Vex, and they're attacking you, your molecules, your atoms, organs, bones, you name it. It's all attacking you. And by the way, they can go after your ghost as well, and that's happened before. Even if you are a guardian, you are not safe. And to translate this back to the Vex worlds, specifically where the Vault of Glass, Infinite Forest, and where the various pure minions are, what the Vex did is they forcefully implanted those seeds into the planets and changed the DNA and everything imaginable of that planet to assimilate that into the collective, so that those planets are then turned into Vex machines, and those machines serve the purposes of the Vex inside the physical universe. The Vault of Glass, as I stated earlier, Atheon was to eventually not only be the focus of all time in the Vault, but eventually become strong enough to become the center of all time in the universe, and then eventually become the center of all time in the entire cosmology. Now, this isn't to say Atheon can do that, it's to say that if you left Atheon alone, that would have been their goal, and possibly, although I don't have the evidence to, it is still technically possible to say that Atheon could have done it if left alone, because that's how potent the Vex are. Same with the Infinite Forest. The Infinite Forest found a way for the Vex to outlast the light and dark itself, all of creation. We don't know if they can outlast the Witness, but we know they can at least outlast everything else in the universe, according to the Infinite Forest. So that's what we had to do. We had to stop the Vex from eventually being the only ones in the universe who will survive. Because if they achieved their goal, there would be nothing left to protect, or really you wouldn't be around either. See, it's like this. The Vex all disagree on everything. But it's when one of them finds a solution to their problem that the rest of them catch on. So we have to go and beat that Vex. Because if we don't beat that Vex, very bad things will happen. The Vex themselves, though, that doesn't explain their identity. As I explained earlier, the Vex are robotic organisms who are cyborgs. They have emotions, at least what they view as emotions. They have specific purposes. They have goals. And they have the ambition to achieve it. The problem with the Vex is, up until now, they've lacked a figurehead. There's no one person we can attach to the Vex who has a stated identity, who has a character that we can remember, and is recognizable in any way. The main reason for that, although I consider it a writing flaw, is this. The Vex themselves base their existence on a gambit. which is to outlast everything in creation. They're willing to sacrifice themselves to do it because some other Vex may achieve that outcome. The Vex Collective, they create a mind with an ideal, a purpose, a literal concept. They bring that into reality, and that being who became a part of the cosmos, or your Atheons, your Panoptes, your Brachians, your sanctified minds, your Quarias, so on and so forth. They were created with a purpose. Their literal concept for existing is to achieve this one thing. Atheon was the literal concept of time. Panoptes was the literal concept of space. Quaria was the dream that was to exist outside of reality. Quaria was to exist in a world that isn't physical, one that you can only describe as dreaming, which is the Ascendant Plane. That's what the Vex would treat as dreaming, because the Ascendant Plane is weird to them. So Quaria was made, so that the Vex could learn about the plane. When you put all this stuff together, you realize that while the Vex Collective is a thing, and they all share the same ambition, you begin to realize that there's more nuance within the various sub-factions of Vex, and they all have different ideas of how they want to achieve their purpose. Because, first off, how do we know it's not just that specific sect of Vex from the Vex worlds just thinking this is the best possible solution, so they send that mind out to go and do it? How do we know it's not just that? How do we know it's not the Vex Collective collectively agreeing to send this mind out to go and achieve the purposes of the collective? That's the weird part in this entire analysis. The part I would say is speculative about the Vex. With that out of the way, the whole point is this. The Vex cosmos in the physical universe is actually quite easy to understand. We have the infinite forest, we have the vault of glass, we have the Pyramidion, which bridges to other timelines, which in of themselves, the Pyramidions contain these things called infinite dimensions, or Hilbert spaces.
You should now be entering a Hilbert space, if the Taken have not misaligned the Pyramidion space geometric intuitions.
Gesundheit.
I did not sneeze, you fool. It is an infinite dimensional functional space. The Vex often... Oh, why am I wasting my breath?
To keep it simple and without getting into jargon, Hilbert spaces are a part of a specific multiverse model. But that's not the point. The whole overall point is the Vex use these large spaces to store information. The Pyramidion, Vault of Glass, Infinite Forest, every other Pyramidion along with that and the Vex worlds, they're all libraries and they all store information. And that information can then be sent back to the Vex domain, where the Vex can do something with that information and then advance their plans. On that note, what is the Vex domain? The Vex domain, it's like the Vex version of the Ascendant Plane. The Vex domain is a world or set of worlds where the Vex go that are beyond the physical limitations of existence. It is there in the Vex domain that the Vex can use their true power and bring anything they wish into reality itself. These things they bring into reality are as real as the person sitting beside you in your home or all the people in the city you're in. That is how real the Vex make their simulations. When they make a universe as a simulation, it is a literal universe that would be the size of the one created by the very Big Bang itself. Then, far deeper inside the Vex domain, we have these set of worlds that belong to individual Vex. These Vex are strong enough to own their own parts of the Vex domain. And then to get even crazier, Quaria Blade Transform initiated the Endless Night. The Endless Night was a complete and utter conquering of the majority of the entirety of the Vex domain. All the Vex within the Vex domain were under the control of Quria. Quria was, to the Vex network, what Oryx is to the Hive. Now, to be clear, Quria never became as powerful as the Hive gods. However, they still were very impressive when they took over almost the entire cosmology of the Vex. Really. It's after Quria that we don't get much. And then comes Final Shape, and we have it. Finally, the narrative critique that the Vex have no one leading them, that we have no one to remember the Vex by. It is finally, in episode Echoes, that we get the one thing to address our criticism. A figurehead. Her name is Maya Sundaresh. She goes by the name The Conductor. She has something called the Echo of Command. This puts her around the current cast, because well before that, she was just a normal human being, or Exo. They couldn't do all the stuff Guardians or other physically capable people could do. No, not at all. But it was when she got the Echo that she obtained power of her own, finally. And then the Vex became important again. The Vex started gaining individuality, self-sentience, not just the barest form of sentience that allowed them to contribute to the collective, being little better than bees, a bit with far more complexity in comparison to such insects. When the Vex started gaining individuality, things changed for them forever. In fact, it is so much of a change to the point that we still don't understand how huge of a difference the Conductor made for the Vex when she entered the world of the Vex, to put it metaphorically, and changed them. There's even some Vex that are friendly with Guardians, which means we may have ally Vex in the future, although it is unknown at this time if we will, because we simply lack the information, and well, Edge of Fate and future expansions haven't come out yet. It is June the 13th by the time I'm making this video, so hopefully things go well for the Vex in the future. But, to give a conclusion for the Vex, it goes like this. The Vault of Glass, the Infinite Forest, and the various Pyramidians in the solar system and beyond the solar system are just tools to the Vex. The Vex network is far more complex as space compared to the three things I just mentioned. And then deep within the Vex network, you have Vex who own their own worlds, or throne worlds to keep it simple. And then you have Quria Blade Transform, who's the most impressive one of them all, literally conquering the cosmos for itself. Granted, it did it for Savathun, but it still conquered the cosmos. And then beyond Quria, we have the Conductor. The Conductor does important stuff for the Vex now, so now she's the most impressive Vex. And it's only with the Conductor that things have changed, so hopefully things change for the better for the Vex in the future. The only other thing left to mention is, what about the Vex who stayed with their creator? What about the Vex who left? What about the Vex who came home? Where does the Conductor fit in with the rest of those Vex? We don't know anything about the Vex past what we've gotten at this point, which is, oh, hey, they're dangerous, they're gonna do certain thing. And then you have the Conductor who's finally fleshing out the Vex as a race. That being said, that still doesn't address the fact that we don't know anything about the other Vex beyond the scope of the cosmology.
Leave us.
What a joyous reunion.
For what reason do you refuse to grant the wish?
Why would I, O Majesty mine? Lest you forget, I am dead, as are the rest of my kind. The Vanguard made sure of it. I need no reason to refuse your wish, only a reason to grant it. What could you possibly offer to entice my cooperation? It wasn't enough for your champions to slay me, but then you saw to the destruction of all my eggs. Well, not all of them.
Like the one in Savathun's spire.
One of many, hidden within my lair, away from your vengeful eyes. But if you were to secure them on my behalf, then you would also secure your heart's desire.
And ensure that the Ahamkara live to terrorize us once again. Very well, Riven. We have struck a bargain.
The Awoken. A race of beings who were created from the battle between the Traveler and the Witness, who then evolved from beyond the reach of the universe, and a home of their own. When eventually enough of them came together and decided to come to the universe in order to join the affairs of the inhabitants who live within it once again. When the Awoken came to the universe, not much happened. Destiny 1 story happened, and we saw that Queen Mara was on the throne, leading all the other Awoken, and Elixni. And they knew a lot about things in the universe. They've been around for a long time. There's a lot of details they would keep in mind. They would know how to get to very obscure places, places that were thought unimaginable to go to at that time. We then made a pact with her, and then we did our own thing. We beat the Vex. Okay, that's it. No more contact from Mara. Then the House of Wolves DLC happened, and Mara called the Guardians in to come deal with the House of Wolves. And quite a slaughter that was. It was so much of a slaughter, in fact, that we hadn't even seen anything of the House of Wolves again in a very long time, if not ever again to be seen. And then nothing else happens after that. And then, finally, the Taken King DLC happens. And apparently, Marasov made a plan with Eris Morn, which they should have talked to us about, instead of telling us, through lore, about their plot. Marasov eventually kicked the bucket after Oryx used his blast. She was then stuck in the Ascendant Plane, going through it as she learned how to use Oryx's power from when he died. Now stuck with the power of Oryx, though not all of it, she traversed through the plane, never to be heard from again. Eventually the Dreaming City DLC happens, and we hear from Marasov. She's in her throne world, and she's doing battle against the darkness, the likes of which we've not seen. Something they won't tell us for quite a long time after that. And then Marasov does the oh-so-hidden foreshadowing story thing, and we don't know anything that's going to happen until quite a long time after the fact. Then Marasov comes back, and she's actually important. Granted, she doesn't do a whole lot. She kind of just sits there and lets the Guardian do all the work. And then she has somewhat of a minimal involvement after that. Really, it kind of just comes down to the Awoken are cool. They got decent magic. They're involved in some way, but they're not as involved as other factions. In my personal opinion, straying from the objectivity for a moment, the Awoken have been poorly mishandled, and they should be written to be better. the Dreaming City was good. It was amazing. It was the biggest expansion to the Awoken that we've ever gotten. And along with the Dreaming City came with some friends of theirs. These wish granters, these Ahamkara, these dragons. At one time, they lived with the Awoken people. Awoken and random dragon walking down the road. That was the most normal thing imaginable at their time. And then the Great Hunt happened. And then Riven was locked up. And then she creates a copy of the Dreaming City below the Dreaming City to not be seen until we somehow access Riven's lair. We're not quite sure about the scope of Riven's lair, but what we do know is Riven's lair is at least the size of the Dreaming City. Not only that, but the Ahamkara themselves are interesting beings. They're wish granters by nature, quite devious, quite chaotic, always fulfilling their own ambitions. That's the type of race they are. They are unapologetically out for themselves. They will do anything imaginable to grant a deal and get power from that deal. It was only the Awoken who knew how to limit themselves to such temptation that the Ahamkara actually begun to live with them, to respect the Awoken as a people. The thing is with the Ahamkara, they do their own thing. The wishes they grant are fueled from the desires of others rather than their own. For if they grant their own wishes, well, it's called the death wish for a reason. They're no longer around. It might be the strongest wish they could ever grant upon anything in the universe. However, it comes at the cost of themselves, and the Ahamkara require desire to stay around. There's only a couple things worth noting about the Dreaming City. First and foremost, there's quite a few throne worlds in the Dreaming City, all of which belong to Marisav. However, it is also worth noting that she said that she doesn't use her throne world anymore. The second of which is Riven's lair could also very well have throne worlds inside of them. Multiple, in fact, as it is an exact copying of the original Dreaming City in specific, which she also helped make using her own power. The only other thing to keep in mind is the Awoken's original home is even further away from the Cosmology than the Dreaming City is, and the Dreaming City is not at all easy to get to. The Awoken lore is certainly impressive. The Forsaken DLC back in 2018 made me feel like I was playing WoW, World of Warcraft for the uninitiated. It felt like I was fighting a giant monster, that if I beat this dragon I would save the city, that I could go through this cool, awesome looking castle, and it felt great. There's a lot of boss battles too, which I enjoy the most in Destiny. Boss battles, more than anything else actually. Like I said earlier, it's a shame because the Awoken felt very mishandled in the game. Perhaps they'll get more significant stuff in the future, like maybe Marisav gets something called the Echo of Salvation, which is the salvation of the Awoken people, and we fight some great mystical scary threat. I would be down for it if that ever happened, but at this point in time, that is simply not the case.
I see sapient life turn to each other. They remember how to look to the stars. They remember curiosity. They remember how to thrive. But they have forgotten.
The Nine, a race we know simultaneously very little, yet we know a lot about. The problem is, though, Their storytelling is just so stingy. We barely have anything on them in the game. Very little on them exists. We have some 9 lore from an old PvP event called Trials of the 9. And then if you grab bounties, you would get very odd dialogue in the form of text. But all the letters are always spaced apart and they're in caps. So you have to read the text and figure out what they're saying. Then a dungeon called Prophecy released. And we still know nothing about the 9. It's just they see light and dark as the same. Of course they would. They're not from this dimension. They're desperate. If the planets disappear, so do they. That's why they want light and dark. Here's the gist of it. The 9 want to escape from their fate. They're almighty, very powerful, unstoppable forces of nature. Yet they're gentle, fragile, weak. If a planet were to explode, their planet, that 9 would die. Not from battle, not from injury, but because his essence is tied with the planet that blew up. It's a very harrowing weakness of theirs. And so the 9 debated upon age, upon age, upon age. And finally, they splintered. One faction of the 9 called the 5. They wished to escape their fate by obtaining the light. The other faction of 9, called the 4, they wished to escape their fate using darkness. And so, they send multiple people into the universe, vessels of theirs. And they use these vessels in order to learn about the denizens of that universe. They try to learn about the Guardians. They try to learn about Ahamkara. They try to learn about the Awoken. They try to learn about everything imaginable. With Guardians in particular, having the nice, shiny golden ticket in front of them in the form of Xur. He comes by every weekend and then disappears every Tuesday until he comes back the following Friday. You go to him and you buy exotic wares. Wares that are randomized every weekend. The 9 use Xur. They use the carrot on the stick of the glittering prizes that you can earn. The amount of power you could have in your hands by holding that weapon. That is what Xur is for. They use Xur because they want to learn about Guardian kind. They presume to know the Guardian's desires based on watching their behaviors in the universe. So they adapt. Once Xur wasn't enough, they then send a second. Orin. Orin was to tell the 9 about what she saw in us, while simultaneously they sent Orin to learn more about us to tell back to them. Orin is a vessel of theirs. In return for having such incredible and legendary power, she became a vessel of the 9, no longer herself. And so, the 9 view us as worthy. That's kind of it. They view us worth acknowledging, worth looking at, worth keeping in mind and consideration. A long time ago, they didn't really care about Guardians. They cared more about the light that they carried. But nowadays, we carry light and dark. We carry such bizarre power. Power that the 9 would benefit from far more than we would. And so they send a third envoy. Their name is Starhorse. And then here's where the whole Paraverse thing comes from. The Paraverse is all the Bungie games inside of it. Starhorse can draw from any part of the Paraverse so that he can run the game show called Dares of Eternity. Dares of Eternity is framed as a game show, but in reality, it's just another way for the 9 to look at the contestants and see what they can glean about them. That's not even the terrifying part. No, the scary part is the 9 are from a dimension that's far beyond the scope of Destiny's cosmology. And Destiny's cosmology already contains the Bungie multiverse inside of it. How powerful do you think the 9 would be if they are beyond the scope of what is effectively their own creator's multiverse? Granted, they're below the Witness, who you should be more terrified by, but the 9 in their own right are very dangerous because they've been left unchecked for well over 11 years at this point. The fact that they've had the time to prepare and cultivate their plans only to finally initiate them now? Whew. I would be terrified to see their strategies in the upcoming DLCs in the next 3 or 4 years, which is the Fate Saga. The 9 should terrify you more than you think. They might not be the Witness, but if you ignore the 9, that will be the last mistake you will have ever made. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last 11 years of 9 lore. Very little. Enough said. I would offer more, but I've already dropped quite a huge nuclear bomb in this segment, so I'm going to go ahead and continue with grace.
The universe makes us all victim and perpetrator. Life's infinite cruelty. You, more than any, suffer both fates. Be free.
The Pale Heart. At this time, the Pale Heart is the newest addition to Destiny's overall cosmology, and a mainstay at that. It's not explained verbatim what the Pale Heart is, just a description of the realm. But if you want the simple answer, it's this. The Traveler has a conscience. It has morals, values, uncertainties, fears, so on and so forth. The Pale Heart is this realm that acts as the brain of the Traveler. When you go inside the Pale Heart, that is the core of the Traveler itself. Its own realm. Its own mind. Its own conscience. Shaped by form. By those in there who are influential to reshape it. The Pale Heart is, and likely will remain, the most important part of Destiny's cosmology in the last couple years. Only a being such as the Witness could hope to reach the Traveler's power, seal it in place, force the opening of a portal into it, to go into a realm that is completely beyond the bounds of the entire cosmology. It was only by using Riven's wish to create a set of ley lines that would allow us to tangibly traverse the journey to the world of the Traveler, and even then, we had help from the Traveler in order to get in there. It was only by battling with our own evils and helping our allies battling their evils. It was only by taking the torture of the Witness, enduring harsh trials along the way, that we were able to finally reach the Witness and do battle. And 3 times we beat it, all with help from the Traveler and those who want to be freed from the Witness. It was only with the entire solar system uniting, everyone and everything, every faction, every single person you could think of attended the final battle. The Witness is the most incredible being in all of Destiny in terms of power. Beyond all logical systems, beyond all beings. Someone so powerful that they alone maintain the power vacuum in both direct and indirect means. It was only with the passing of the Witness that the entire cosmology went back into disarray. Many factions, many people struggled to obtain enough power necessary to fulfill the gap left by the Witness. It was only through the creation of the Echoes that such people were able to obtain their dreams, obtain power they have. However, not even the newly obtained power that they grasp in their hands at this time could reach the true power of the Witness. It was only a being of the Witness's power level who could truly threaten the Traveler in all of Destiny. No other person compares. No thing, no power, no feat, no statement, nothing. The entire scope of the Witness was the only being successfully in Destiny to conquer the Traveler, to subjugate the Traveler, and to use it as a vessel for its own wishes. No other being was able to make the Traveler bend to its knee in such a degree, and even then the Traveler still fought back. The Traveler is easily the most incredible being inside the entire mythos alongside the Witness, with the ability to propagate chaos by creating life, sowing the seed of life in many worlds. The Traveler giving its gift to many, all in hopes of achieving what it truly wanted, a champion, all to battle against its fated enemy, the Witness. And thus, here we are 11 years later in the story of Destiny. It is worth keeping in mind, however, the Traveler and the Witness at their peak will be the most powerful characters in the entire mythos for such a long time. Perhaps even the rest of our days. It's unknown how and why someone would surpass the Witness, nor would the means be obtainable at this point. I would be very surprised if it didn't take at least 3 to 4 years from now for someone to surpass the Witness. Any longer than that, and I would not be surprised. The Pale Heart, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting parts of Destiny. It illustrates the last 10-11 years of storytelling that we have seen, experienced, and had good and bad times with. I enjoyed my entire playthrough of the final shape on all 3 characters, and I'm pretty sure I'm also going to enjoy the entire story of Edge of Fate when it arrives too. My last note is this, however. If the Pale Heart is beyond the entire cosmos, including the 9, how powerful do you truly think the Traveler is?
His act, the callous you face is no almighty emperor, but something far more dangerous. A hungry, desperate beast. Once the Cabal Empire and all its bounty was his to command and his to consume. Joy was his purpose and his strength, he said. To angst over edicts and enemies was weakness. But I could see in his eyes dread that his pleasures would soon come to an end, clouding his sight from an incoming coup. I should have killed him then, but I thought exile more fitting. I thought he'd shrivel to nothing in the void of space. Instead, he caught a glimpse of something more. The chance to become greater than he'd ever been. Like a war beast after a blood scent, he chased that chance, abandoning all honor, reason. There was nothing he would not sacrifice for his own salvation. And when the witness came to him at last, Callus faced what he had run from all along. If we don't stop him, he'll make sure it's the end for us all.
The section that I didn't have a name for, so I'm calling it the Miscellaneous tab. The Miscellaneous tab includes things I am not fully certain about or I've not covered in the video prior, so this is my second chance at covering them before I forget. First things first, what about the 3 disciples? Rolk is verbatim the strongest character before the events of the Final Shape DLC. Rolk is above everyone physically except for the witness. Nezarek, assuming he's at full power and he has people praying to him, would be relative to Rolk in power, but would have better hacks. Callus is just straight up worse than the 2. The thing to keep in mind with the disciples, even Callus, is all 3 of them scale above the Hive Gods. So, no matter where you debate about the disciples, they are all for sure above all the Hive Gods. Plain and simple. Next on the docket, God Gaul. God Gaul happened because Guardian Gaul was defeated by the main character, then he awakened into what he called a god. We have 2 names for Gaul. There is Guardian Gaul, when he has guardian powers, and then there is Light Gaul, or God Gaul, where he becomes that super giant Phoenix Cabal thing. It was actually literally impossible to put Gaul somewhere until Rolk came out, and here's why. Gaul was the most dubious character to put somewhere on a tier list compared to the rest of the cast. All we knew was a nerfed Traveler that just woke up, one-shotted Gaul. However, there's nothing to say that the Traveler couldn't do the same to the Disciples either. The only thing I can say about Gaul is this. Either you say he's on the weaker end of the Hive Gods, or you put him above the Hive Gods but below the Disciples. He's in a very awkward spot. All we know was he lost to the Traveler, and even while the Traveler is nerfed, it would still beat just about anyone else in Gaul's position at the time. Therefore, the only conclusion I can give for Gaul is, put him wherever you think he is. Maybe he's weaker than the Mindbender. Maybe you have him above Panoptes. Maybe you have him above Zol. Maybe you have him above Oryx. Maybe you have him above Callus. What is for sure, however, is he is below Rolk. If you want my honest opinion on where I would put him, realistically, I would put him above the Scorn Barons, possibly around full power Crota. I think it's the safest place to put him. Put him around Oryx if you wish. Just try not to get hit by an onslaught of Hive God fans, and come back to me on how that works. The last note I wanted to bring up is Warmind Rasputin, as well as structures that power scale somewhere. Warmind Rasputin is veritable. His potency level completely depends on the technology that he has access to, along with a space station and other technology. If you put Rasputin at his peak, he is around the Traveler, at the Traveler's peak, before final shape or lightfall. There isn't a whole lot I could say about Rasputin, since a lot of his showings are off-screen, while a lot of his intelligence feats are on-screen, and they're in lore. We have a whole lot of consistent stuff for him, but his place is more veritable in the cosmos, and there's some debatability to where you can put Rasputin amongst the cast. Next, let's talk about the structures. I'm talking about the pyramid ships, them going in the portal so they become the monolith and the pale heart. Seraph Station, the space station we went on to for the Vespers Host dungeon. The Morning Star space station. Rolk's Vault, the Upended, and a whole lot of other stuff that I've not brought up by name. The whole goal of those structures is just to further reinforce the size of the cosmology and make it look bigger. The structures themselves don't inherently add anything on their own. They just further add to the point of, hey, this guy is really tough. If this structure can't hold him, he must be really scary. Or, this guy can just blow up a throne world for no freaking reason and tank the energy output of the thing that can do that. That's all the structures are for. They don't inherently add anything on their own. I'm sure there is stuff I'm forgetting to mention, like maybe some notes about the sundial, but even then, something like the sundial would fall back into the same problem. While there is a lot to discuss with the various structures in Destiny, and perhaps worth their own video in the future if I get a request, they're not as important to this video, since I'm also trying to keep this under 2 hours. Another obvious problem I see would be Fikrul. Fikrul created the Revenant Plane. The only problem is, the only statement we have regarding the Revenant Plane is just a comparison made by Nezarec. He says the Revenant Plane is this tumor on reality. It is a perfect reflection of the universe. We don't know if it's just a throne world or if it's a literal exact copy of the physical universe in its entirety. The problem with this is that causes confusion on where you put Fikrul. I think Fikrul versus Savathun is somewhat debatable. The problem I see is throwing Fikrul up against Xivu or Wrath or current Oryx. I don't think he's going to survive, because both have ways of getting around his physiology, which is something the main character had a really hard time struggling with. While I could see Savathun beating Fikrul if she had prep, I mostly see the other two Hive Gods beating her more often than not. The last note of semi-importance would be the Sea of Stars in the old cruise. There's not much I can say about them, other than the main character cannot one-shot the Pirate Lords, and they cannot one-shot the ship captains. All of which are terrified of Aramis the ship stealer. The main character would physically be around Aramis the ship stealer.
All is not yet lost. The Witness may have won this battle, but it is wounded. And while you've been occupied here, within the Traveler's heart, I've brought our allies to help you land the final blow. The full might of Keitel's empire stands behind us in this endeavor. Mizrax Kel rallies his House of Light to save their great machine. And I have found a guardian of great renown, Micah 10, who comes to us with bold ideas. If you intend to subdue the Witness, we must first fight its corruption and weaken its hold on the Traveler. You will grow in strength, in power, and when the reckoning is at last upon us, you will storm the Witness's monolith and strike where it is most vulnerable. You will shatter its hold on the Traveler, and you will end it.
And here we are. The last cosmological section in this video. What could I possibly discuss that would be of so much significance to me that I feel it outweighs the rest of what I talked about in the video by and far? I'll put it to you this way. Me and you are not the only two people who play Destiny. In fact, there are two other people who are playing it as we speak that view even us as insignificant pests, insects, not even worthy of their time. These two have warred on their philosophy regarding the video game Destiny since their inception, which there wasn't even an inception. They just existed because. They are the ones that topple cause and effect. They're the ones more fundamental than the circular reasonings we employ all the time when we defend something we believe. These two beings are so important to the franchise that they are the reason we even have Destiny the game. Allow me to demonstrate the two strongest characters in Destiny, the Gardener and the Winnower, the creators of Destiny. If you recall me discussing the flower game earlier, good. Let me bring up the flower game again. Destiny the video game is the flower game. The flower game has been played beyond an inconceivably infinite amount of times by now, all of which ending with the same conclusion. Even despite the fact that the entire cosmos is remade to be more powerful than the cosmos before it, the result always is the same. The final shape wins out. The champions of darkness claim their title as the strongest and the only one in the universe, and then it is all ended and then restarted and played again. Eventually, the Gardener got tired of the Winnower's games. They got tired of how boring the flower games always were, time and time again, with the repeated repetition of the same thing happening over and over and over and over and over. Eventually, they got into a fight. From their battle, all of time and space itself was born. Nothing was the same after that. The Gardener and the Winnower directly involved themselves in the flower game that they played. The entire cosmos was remade, more powerful than it ever was before. The Gardener and the Winnower fought with so much ferocity that an entire cosmos was born of their collective energies. This has never happened before. The entire cosmos was born from their battle. The cosmos we have today is stronger than any version of the cosmos you could conceivably think of from the start of creation up to now. Part of the reason why Destiny 2 the video game works the way it does is because this is the iteration of the flower game where things changed. But is only because the Winnower believes the Guardians are fulfilling the law of the sword logic that the Winnower decides that he can take a step back from now and let everything play out the way they would on their own. The Winnower doesn't have to do anything. In battling against the Witness, the Guardians fulfill the prophecy of the final shape, that they themselves bring on a change to reality so significant that it was never the same again. That in repelling one final shape, they brought about another. And thus, the Winnower does not have to do anything. He can just sit back and watch the entire cosmos that him and the Gardener created in their battle play out the way it would without their involvement. And so, while missing a bunch of details to get here so we can do this under 2 hours, that is mostly the cosmology. Now, I am more than sure by now, seeing how I was working on this video for multiple days, that I missed a lot of details going into this. And you know what? That's fine. I covered most of the important stuff. I covered the changes to the cosmology, I covered the individual sections and what I thought about the races that mattered to that part of the cosmos, and overall, I think I did my job here. There's plenty more to be made content about, or rather, I'll restate that. There's plenty of stuff I could still make content on. However, I think it is here that I will leave you for today, my dear viewers. Thank you for giving me your time, attention, and a chance to prove to you, even the newcomers who've not watched me before, that Destiny is far more important cosmologically than you thought before. That a mere universe you conceived of is in reality something much greater than you ever thought it could be. And thus, that is the goal of today's video. If you like this video, please help me out by liking, sharing, subscribing. Show this on Power Scaling Wiki, Reddit, Comic Vine, TikTok, Space Battle forums, character stats, you name it, every platform imaginable. I want you to share this on there because I want other people to know that Destiny has a really significant cosmology and it is not at all for the faint of heart to go over. And because I made this video today, I just want everyone else to know, at least on a certain level, what us Destiny fans are looking at when we talk about Destiny's cosmos. Now, that's all I have for you today. I don't think I have anything else on the docket to bring up that would make this erroneously longer than it should be, so I'll leave it here. My name is Nothing Important here. Please like, share, and subscribe. A share would very much help out. Likes are amazing too. Anything you can do to contribute to my channel's growth is extremely helpful. Now, I will see you later, and I'm going to get some sleep. Peace.